She thought marrying a rich man meant her struggles were over. But that mansion held storms no one warned her about. Stay with me now. This story ain't just about pain. It's about power, too. Maybe even yours. You ever walk into a place so pretty it made your breath catch in your throat, but somehow still feel unwanted? That was the day Liana stepped through the gates of the Worthington estate. Not as a guest, not as help, but as a bride. Her dark skin gleamed like onyx under that Carolina sun, her white dress soft as clouds. But when she looked at her new mother-in-law, Meredith Worthington, all she saw was a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. She walked into that mansion carrying her dignity like a crown, but they only saw her skin, not her soul. Now, don't get it twisted. Liana ain't no fragile flower. Born in Birmingham, raised by a seamstress mama who stitched love into every hem, she learned early how to make beauty out of broken threads. She worked her way through college, built her own boutique, and didn't let nobody, not even her own blood cousins, tell her she was too dark to dream big. So when she met Jonathan Worthington, yes, that Worthington, heir to a fortune made in shipping and politics, she wasn't chasing no fairy tale. But love'll find you even when you ain't looking. And baby, when he looked at her, whew, that man saw sunlight in her midnight. At least, that's what she thought. The wedding was in Charleston. Spanish moss hung from the oaks like secrets, and the garden bloomed as if even the flowers came to witness. But when Liana arrived, early, excited, nervous, she overheard something that curdled the sweetness in her throat. "She's in the foyer," said Meredith, voice clipped like cold pearls. "She's lovely," a guest offered. "Oh, I thought that was the maid." "My mistake," Meredith replied, sipping her champagne with a smile too practiced to be real. That word. Maid. Like Liana's presence could only be explained through service. Like her beauty, her elegance, her right to stand there, was a misunderstanding. She didn't cry. Not then. She walked down that aisle with her head high, smile steady, even as the whispers brushed her veil like gnats. But let me tell you something about black women, like Liana, especially ones who've had to fight for every inch of peace. They don't forget. They collect moments like that. And baby, one day, they make 'em pay interest. That night, at the reception, Meredith raised a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to strong women who know their place." The room chuckled. Even Jonathan looked uncomfortable. But Liana, she just smiled, because even then, she had a plan. And child, you won't believe what she did next. That mansion looked like gold, and silence, but her silence, was a scream nobody cared to hear. After the honeymoon in Paris, they came back home, or so she thought. But truth is, that mansion never felt like hers, because in that house, Liana had the last name, but Meredith still had the throne. Meredith Worthington, sharp as bone china, sweet as arsenic. She wore her racism like perfume, elegant, expensive, and choking. "Oh, that color is so vibrant on you, darling. So exotic. You know how to polish silver, don't you?" "I assume so. No need to worry about the gala menu. Jonathan prefers real food." Liana smiled, but inside every word was a needle. And Jonathan? He heard it. He saw it. But he never checked her. "That's just how she is," he'd whisper. "She'll come around." But when someone treats you like a guest in your own life, you don't wait for them to change. You start to change yourself. Still, Liana tried. She brought flowers to brunch. She asked to help. She sent cards, made tea, offered peace. Until one afternoon, she overheard Meredith in the garden, laughing. "With girls like that, it's always a phase. My son will come back to his type. They always do." His type. Liana didn't flinch. But that sentence struck a nerve carved years ago. It took her back to her 7th grade classroom, where her teacher once told her, "Girls like you don't end up in fashion magazines. Try something realistic." That's when she realized prejudice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, with a smile. That night, Liana began writing. A letter to herself, a plan for the future, and a promise. "I will not be remembered as anyone's lesson or mistake." But what she didn't know was someone had been watching, because 2 days later, The letter disappeared from her drawer, and the war began. Sometimes the loudest scream is the one we hold in silence. And in that house, even the mirrors lied. It was a cloudy Friday when Meredith made her move. "Liana, come with me to the ladies' circle. There's a charity tea. You may pick up a few things." Liana paused. Pick up what, exactly? Obedience? Proper posture? The art of pretending? But she went. Because sometimes you fight battles in gloves and pearls. At the tea, the conversations floated like perfume. Soft, cloying, full of hidden thorns. "And you, Liana, do you do anything?" "Oh, you own a boutique? That's adorable. I just love how inclusive fashion is these days. All styles welcome, right?" All styles. Like she was a fashion experiment. A charity project wearing heels. Liana smiled, but her chest was tight. On the drive back, Meredith didn't waste time. She leaned in, voice low, words sharp. "Jonathan is sensitive. He's always been. I only worry that he's giving up more than he realizes." Liana looked out the window. The trees blurred past, tall and thin, like ghosts lined up in judgment. But Meredith wasn't done. "You know," she added casually, "the inheritance, the foundation, the estates, it all goes to Jonathan, naturally. But none of it is finalized yet. The paperwork is delicate. I do hope things stay stable. Delicate. That's what she meant. Delicate enough to change if Jonathan kept loving a woman who didn't look like his mother." In that moment, Liana saw the game. It wasn't just about color. It was about power. She wasn't a wife. She was a threat, an outsider with too much presence. But what Meredith didn't know was, Liana came from women who sewed their dignity into torn fabric, who raised children on grit and gospel. She wasn't afraid of porcelain masks. She'd grown up dodging real knives. That night, Liana stared at her reflection and whispered to herself, "You are not a phase. You are the foundation." But when she walked into the bedroom, the letter was on the bed, opened, laid out, and across the final line, in red lipstick, someone had written, "You don't belong here. Some smiles shine like gold, but hide venom, bitter than bile." After that lipstick message, Liana started watching everything closer. She noticed how the housekeeper flinched when Meredith entered, how the gardener, a black man named Carl, never looked anyone in the eye, how the family photos, every single one, stopped at Jonathan's high school graduation. No Liana, no future, just a shrine to a past Meredith wouldn't let die. Dinner time became a ritual of frost. Meredith at the head of the table, Jonathan on one side, Liana on the other, a long oak distance between them. "Have you tried the duck?" Meredith would say, then turn to Jonathan. "Remember Florence, the girl from Yale? She's working with the mayor now. Brilliant girl." Jonathan would chuckle, awkward. Liana would sip her wine. And sometimes she would whisper a prayer to herself just to hold her spine together, because silence hurts more than insults. And being erased right in front of the man you love, that's a special kind of grief. But one night, it changed, because Liana caught Meredith in the study, door half open, whispering on the phone. "It's just a matter of time. I'm protecting our family name. She'll leave. They always leave. They, always." Liana didn't burst in. She didn't scream. She turned, walked quietly back upstairs, and began building her counterattack. She reached out to a lawyer, not one of Jonathan's rich boy friends, a sister in Atlanta named Ava Reddick, who'd handled discrimination cases for years. Ava read the situation real fast. "Sounds like you married into a plantation with Wi-Fi, baby," she said. "Let's protect what's yours before they erase you completely." So Liana started documenting everything. The comments, the looks, the inheritance threats, even the lipstick letter. But just as she began to fight back, Jonathan started pulling away. He worked late, missed calls, grew cold in bed. And one night, when she reached for him, he flinched. "You're not acting like yourself," he said. "You've been paranoid lately." Paranoid. That's the word they use when black women speak truth in a white room. But it was what he said next that broke her. "Maybe my mother was right." Liana blinked and didn't say a word. "Because, baby, sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from the one who once saw your soul. And when she checked his phone the next day, What she found would crack something wide open. They said she was too dark to be family, but sometimes silence is a louder answer than words. It was 2:14 a.m. when Liana picked up his phone. Jonathan was in the shower, and the light from his screen glowed like a warning. She wasn't the type to snoop, but pain changes you, makes you brave, or reckless. She opened the messages. At first, nothing strange. Work texts, frat friends. Then, a name she didn't recognize. M. Just 3 letters. But the messages were loud. She's always angry. You deserve peace. She doesn't fit the Worthington image. We all see it, John. Come home. Real home. And finally, a photo. A blonde woman in pearls, kissing Jonathan's cheek in the Worthington garden. Timestamp, last week. The same day Meredith claimed to have gone out for tennis. Her hands trembled, but no tears came, because something deeper than sadness settled in her bones. Clarity. Liana took a screenshot, saved everything, then quietly placed the phone back on the nightstand. Jonathan came out, towel around his waist, humming. She looked at him like she was seeing a stranger wearing her husband's face. "You okay?" he asked, and Liana just smiled. "Fine," she said, "just thinking about how beautiful this house is. At night, it almost feels honest." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she walked the halls barefoot, touching walls, remembering every insult, every cold dinner, every moment she bit her tongue. By morning, she'd made a decision, not just to leave, but to win. Because if they thought she came from nothing, they had no idea what kind of woman rises from fire. She called Ava, told her everything. But when she walked into the parlor that afternoon, ready to confront them all, she found something else on the marble coffee table. A thick envelope, the Worthington Family Trust paperwork, signed by Jonathan, without her. And baby, taped to the last page, was a note in Meredith's handwriting. A woman who can be replaced. Will be. She walked into that mansion carrying her dignity like a crown, but they only saw her skin, not her soul. The next morning, Liana didn't cry. She dressed slow, all black, no makeup, hair wrapped in silk. A quiet funeral for the girl who once believed love alone could protect her. She sat at the breakfast table like nothing was broken, hands folded, voice calm. Jonathan walked in, looked everywhere but her eyes. Meredith, already sipping her citrus water, flipping through town and country like war hadn't been declared. Liana looked straight at her. "I saw the trust documents and the note." Meredith didn't blink. "Then I'm sure you understand what's at stake." Jonathan flinched. "Liana, I meant to tell you. It's just legal housekeeping. No one's trying to hurt you. But baby," the truth was already bleeding through his shirt collar. "And Liana," she was done pretending. "You made me a guest in my own marriage," she said, soft. "And now you want to make me disappear." Politely, she stood. "I don't need your name. I have my own. But you're about to learn what happens when a woman with nothing to lose starts telling the truth." That night, she emailed everything to Ava. The texts, the lipstick note, the paperwork, even a voice recording she made of Meredith's little garden monologue. And Ava moved like thunder. The next morning, Liana filed a claim for emotional distress, defamation, and spousal financial coercion. She wasn't just playing defense anymore. She was calling the storm. But the Worthington name was powerful, and Meredith knew how to spin a tale. 2 days later, a reporter showed up at Liana's boutique, asked her about marital instability. Ora called her a risk to the family's philanthropic legacy. Liana smiled, handed her a copy of the lawsuit, and walked back inside with Grace on her heels. But baby, the storm hadn't peaked yet, because later that night her boutique alarm went off, windows shattered, spray paint across the front, gold digger, trash back to the hood. And that's when she realized they weren't just trying to push her out, they wanted to break her completely. But what they didn't know is what she found buried in the Worthingtons' attic 2 days later would change everything. Every family got a skeleton, baby. But this one had bones soaked in shame. The attic of the Worthington estate was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels watched. Dust thick as secrets, old trunks with brass corners, faded hat boxes, history boxed and hidden. Liana went up there alone, not to snoop, to remember who she was. The kind of girl who used to climb into closets and dream of runways, not courtrooms. She opened a cedar trunk labeled M. Worthington, Paris 1984, silks, scarves, a folded invitation to a presidential gala. Then, something underneath, a smaller box, locked, but the wood cracked easy. Inside, letters, dozens, yellowed envelopes, all handwritten, some signed by a name Liana didn't recognize. Josephine B. She read one, then another, and another. Her hands started to shake, because what those letters revealed. Meredith Worthington had a sister, a half-sister, black, from New Orleans, Josephine. And not just that, but she'd been disowned, hidden, bought off, sent away. I forgive you, one letter read, but I will not disappear. Another had a baby photo clipped inside. On the back, M.J. Worthington, 1987. May you never forget where his blood comes from. His blood! Liana sat there for a long time, heart pounding. M.J. Meredith Jr.? Meredith's son? No. That couldn't be. Unless Meredith's precious Jonathan wasn't just her son, but her secret. Half black, just like the woman she tried to erase. Liana closed the box slow. See, truth has a smell, like storm rain on hot pavement. And what Liana held now was thunder. She took photos of everything, packed the letters in her tote, and climbed down those attic stairs with a new kind of strength. Because the woman who had called her the Maid at her own wedding had spent decades hiding her own kin, and the man who turned cold in her bed was about to find out he was born of the same skin he'd let his mother shame. But when Liana stepped into the hallway, Meredith was standing there, in the dark, holding a match, and whispered, "You weren't supposed to find that. Some women burn bridges, but Liana..." She burned the silence. The attic door creaked shut behind her. Liana stood face to face with Meredith, eyes cold, fingers tight around a single match. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning, and a confession. "You weren't supposed to find that," Meredith said again, voice low, lips barely moving. Liana held her ground. "I did, and I made copies." Meredith's hand trembled, not from fear, from fury. "You don't know what this could do," she hissed. "To Jonathan, to this family. That woman was your sister," Liana snapped. "And he's not just your son. He's hers too. Or do you forget what blood tastes like when it's inconvenient?" Silence. Then Meredith stepped back, straightened her silk robe, and whispered like ice, "Say one word, and you'll regret ever walking into this house." "But baby..." That's when Liana smiled, because regret was behind her now, and power. It was finally in her hands. She left that attic, called Ava, sent every letter, every photo, every trace of Josephine's truth. Then she did the one thing Meredith never expected. She told Jonathan. She laid it all out, quiet, honest, no spite. The letters, the attic, the baby photo with his name. The truth that his mother had buried a whole sister and her own grandson just to keep the Worthington image white. He sat in silence, didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared out the window like he was looking at the world for the first time. And then he whispered, "She told me my father was gone, that he was traveling, but he used to hum Creole lullabies when he put me to bed." Liana blinked. He looked up at her, eyes red, voice cracking. "I thought I made you feel small, but all this time, I didn't even know who I was." She didn't reach for him, didn't say a word, because some things you gotta sit in. And he was finally sitting in his own skin. But that wasn't the end. Not yet, because the next day, Meredith made her move. She called the foundation board, filed for a protective restriction on the estate, froze the boutique account Jonathan had gifted Liana last year. She wanted to remind everyone, especially Liana, who still held the keys to the empire. But baby, that same afternoon, the news broke. Ava had done it, and the story was everywhere. Charleston heiress hid, black half-sister for decades, inheritance scandal rocks, Worthington legacy, with photos, letters, dates, and the headline, "Fashion designer Liana Worthington unearths truth behind Southern dynasty." But just when Liana thought the storm had passed, she received a letter, handwritten, no stamp, just 4 words. "You ruined everything, Jay." There's a kind of quiet that ain't peace. It's just pain, waiting for a place to land. That letter stayed on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Unopened, unread, unspoken. And Jonathan? Gone. No calls, no text. Just vanished into the fog of scandal and shame. Liana went back to work, slowly, one stitch at a time. She opened her boutique with boarded windows still stained from hate. But her hands, they were steady, because every dress she touched reminded her she was not built to be erased. The media frenzy boiled and cooled. Some praised her, some called her a liar. Some said she used her race for revenge. But the truth? It don't need everyone's approval. Only light. One afternoon, Carl, the gardener, came to her boutique. A quiet man, always nodding, never speaking much. But that day, he took off his cap, looked her in the eye. "My mama knew Josephine," he said. "Used to braid her hair on Sundays. Said she was the kindest woman in this whole county. Till they sent her away." He pulled a faded photo from his coat. There they were. Josephine, Carl's mama, a baby. Mama said she used to hum to that boy. Said he had eyes full of gold and skin soft like dusk. Liana's throat tightened, because now she knew the legacy wasn't just scandal. It was blood. It was history. And she was the only one who hadn't run from it. Later that week, the court date arrived. Liana wore a soft gray suit. No jewelry, just dignity. Meredith entered in pearls and coldness, flanked by lawyers. Jonathan showed up late, alone, pale, silent. He looked at Liana like a man who couldn't find his own reflection. The judge read the claims. Inheritance fraud, emotional duress, cultural defamation, suppression of familial identity. A long list, centuries long if we're being honest. But it wasn't the court that changed everything. It was what Liana said when they asked if she had final words. She stood, looked straight at Meredith. "I didn't come here for your money. I came for your mirror, so you could finally see the woman you've tried to destroy, and the one you spent your life pretending didn't exist." The courtroom went still. Even Meredith's eyes blinked, just once. But what broke her wasn't the judge. It was the door at the back of the courtroom. Because when it opened, a woman stepped in, mid-60s, skin the color of honey at dusk, eyes full of storms and lullabies. And when Meredith saw her, she gasped, covered her mouth, because standing there, alive and undeniable, was Josephine. Not all ghosts come to haunt, some come to witness. The courtroom didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. Josephine stood in the doorway like a memory with breath. She wore no makeup, no pearls, just a long navy coat and a scarf that looked hand-woven, threads of blue and earth, soft and strong. Meredith didn't speak, couldn't. Her face went pale, then red, a trembling statue of shame. Jonathan looked from his mother to the woman at the door, to Liana. "Who is she?" he asked, voice thin, uncertain. Liana didn't answer, because some truths speak for themselves. Josephine walked slowly, quietly, each step like justice with soft heels. She approached the bench. The judge nodded. "You may speak." She cleared her throat, voice deep, gentle, steady as a church bell. "My name is Josephine B. Worthington. I am the half-sister of Meredith Langston Worthington. She paid my mother to disappear when I was 19, and she buried my name because it made her uncomfortable. But blood don't vanish, Your Honor. It remembers." She turned to the courtroom, to Meredith. "You took everything from me. My place, my brother, my child's name. But you couldn't take my soul, and I came back to watch you choke on the truth you thought you'd buried." Meredith trembled, still silent. "And Jonathan," tears welled in his eyes. "You mean I'm—" Josephine walked to him, placed a photo in his hand. "I was 17. Your father loved me, but his family didn't. They sent him off to Europe, told me I was lucky to get a settlement." She looked at Meredith, "And she made sure the world never knew you were mine." Silence again, but it wasn't cold now. It was thick, alive, like a church full of souls holding hands in pain. Liana watched it all, tears in her throat, fists unclenched, because this wasn't just a reckoning, it was a resurrection. That night the news exploded again. "Lost Worthington's sister testifies in shocking family trial." Fashion designer Liana Worthington vindicated as secret history emerges. The public turned, and for once, they weren't praising Liana's grace under pressure. They were naming the truth, calling it what it was. Racism, colorism, inheritance theft, a century-old lie unraveling in silk gloves. But back at the mansion, Meredith was unraveling too. And when Liana returned home to pack the last of her things, she found Meredith sitting on the edge of the grand staircase, alone, hair undone, dress wrinkled. She didn't look up, just whispered, "I tried to keep the ugliness out." Liana paused, then answered, "No, Meredith, you just tried to keep it in. And now it's spilling all over your marble floors." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Meredith spoke again. "It was always about fear. His blood on my name, your skin in my family. It was fear, that's all." Liana looked back one last time. "And now?" she asked softly. Meredith didn't answer. She just stared at the portrait above the fireplace, the one of Jonathan as a boy, alone. But that night, another portrait arrived in a package, and when Liana opened it, her knees gave out. Every house tells a story, but some walls only speak when they know you're ready to listen. The package was wrapped in brown paper and twine. No return address, just a note inside, scribbled in deep blue ink. She painted it after you left. She said one day you'd need to see yourself through her eyes. Carl inside, beneath layers of tissue paper, was a canvas, big, heavy, and when Liana pulled it free, she gasped. It was her, not a photo, not a posed image, a painting of her standing in the Worthington garden, head high, dark skin glowing under the sun. But not alone. Behind her, a woman with the same cheekbones, same fire in the eyes. Josephine, holding the hand of a child, a boy with honey-brown skin and a golden curl across his brow. And the title painted in tiny script at the bottom, "The Bloodline They Tried to Bury." Liana sank to the floor. It was too much, too big, too beautiful, because it wasn't just a portrait. It was a prophecy. A declaration that her presence in that house was never a mistake. It was a return. That night she called Josephine. They talked for hours, about everything, about nothing, laughing through tears. "You were never alone, baby," Josephine said. "They just made you think you were. But we've been watching, waiting." Liana whispered, "I didn't just survive, I became." And Josephine replied, "No, you remembered who you were before they tried to rewrite you." But the next morning, Liana received a legal notice from Jonathan. One final attempt to divide the boutique assets. A quiet betrayal wrapped in legal terms. It stung. But baby, she didn't cry. She smiled, walked into her boutique, lit incense, played Mahalia Jackson loud, and then she painted over his name on the boutique wall. In bold gold script she wrote, "Josephine's legacy. Est by blood, not permission." But just as she finished that final stroke, the bell above the boutique door rang, and standing there was Jonathan. No suit, no lawyers, just an envelope in his hand, and something in his eyes Liana hadn't seen in weeks. Regret, and maybe redemption. Some names are written in gold, others are carved in scars, but Liana, she was done carrying what never honored her. He stood there in the doorway like a man trying to find the ground under his feet. No ring, no swagger, just the envelope, and a silence too heavy for the small boutique. Liana didn't speak. She let the air hang, let him carry the weight, this time. Finally, Jonathan stepped forward. "I dissolved the boutique claim. You built it. It's yours. I see that now." She nodded. Didn't say thank you. Didn't have to. Then he held out the envelope. "I wrote something. Not for the court. For you." She hesitated. Took it. Inside was a letter. Not long, but honest. "I was raised to think love was a reflection of reputation. But you were a mirror to my soul. I failed you because I didn't know how to fight what I hadn't faced in myself. I see you now. I see me now. And I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find peace." She folded it slow. "You're too late," she said softly. Not cruel, not bitter, just done. He nodded, eyes wet, then turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Is it true?" he asked. "Am I really Josephine's son?" Liana stared at him a moment. You want her blood? Go earn her blessing. And with that, he left. No grand goodbye, just a quiet ending. Later that week, Liana visited Josephine again. They sat on the porch, watching the trees sway like old women humming hymns. You look lighter, Josephine said. I feel real, Liana answered. Then she pulled out a legal document from her purse, signed and notarized. I'm changing my name, she said. Not to Worthington, not to anything from them. I'm going back to my mother's name, Liana Imani Wells. Josephine smiled, eyes misty. A name with roots. And baby, let me tell you, that moment, that name, it was rebirth. But just as they clinked glasses of sweet tea to celebrate, Liana's phone rang. It was Ava. She answered, listened, eyes wide, then hung up. The will's been contested, she said quietly. Meredith changed it last night. Josephine raised an eyebrow. To who? Liana stared out at the horizon, face still, voice low. To me. She didn't beg for power. She became it. The final Worthington will reading was held in the same room where Meredith once toasted. To women who know their place. Funny thing about fate, it don't just spin, it remembers. Liana walked in wearing deep emerald. Not for vanity, for victory. The board was there. The lawyers, Jonathan, and Meredith, in a wheelchair now, pale and withdrawn, pride stitched into silence. The estate lawyer stood, cleared his throat, and read the addendum. To Liana Imani Wells, I leave controlling interest in the Worthington Philanthropic Trust, ownership of the historic family home, and all attached legacy rights. Let this serve as public acknowledgement that her grace, dignity, and truth reflect more of our family's values than I ever did. Meredith Langston Worthington. The room held its breath. Jonathan blinked, stunned. The board members whispered. And Meredith? She looked at Liana. One last time, eyes soft with something like surrender. Liana stepped forward. I don't want your house, she said. I want to change it. Gasps. She laid out her plan. Turn the estate into a cultural refuge. A women's arts center named after Josephine. A space for black girls to dream, louder than the voices that try to shrink them. And as for the foundation, she'd restructure the board. Make room for people with dirt under their nails and dreams in their hands. This legacy doesn't belong to one bloodline anymore, she said. It belongs to truth, to justice, to everyone you tried to keep outside the gate. A long pause, then one board member clapped. Another followed, and then standing ovation. But Liana wasn't doing it for applause. She was doing it for the girl inside her, the one who heard Maid on her wedding day and chose to build a kingdom instead. As she walked out of that meeting, sun hitting her skin like a soft crown, a young black girl, maybe 16, approached her. She held a notebook, shy eyes, and asked, Are you the woman from the news, the one they tried to erase? Liana smiled, knelt down. No, baby. I'm the woman they couldn't. But that night, when she finally hung Josephine's portrait in the grand hall, she heard a sound behind her. A knock, at the mansion door. She opened it slow, and there stood a face she hadn't seen in years. Her own father. Some wounds don't bleed. They wait, until the right knock wakes them. She hadn't seen his face in over 20 years. Her father, Michael Wells, gone since she was 12, left for opportunity. Never called back. And now, here he was, a little grayer, a little smaller, but those same eyes, her eyes. Liana, he whispered, I saw you on the news. I knew. I had to come. She stared, stone still. I buried you, she said softly. In every missed birthday, every lie I had to tell for you. He nodded, tears already falling. I didn't think I was good enough to be your father. So I ran. Silence. Then, well, she said, voice cracking. You were right. But then she stepped aside, because sometimes forgiveness ain't loud. Sometimes it's just letting someone sit in the room where they once left you alone. They talked into the night about her mother, her childhood, about how he watched every success from a distance, too ashamed to reach out. And when he left the next morning, he placed something in her hand, a tiny worn photo of Liana as a baby, held by her father, and a smiling woman beside them, Josephine. Your mother's best friend, he said. They marched together back in the 70s. That's how I met her. Everything circled back, full, And that day, Liana knew what she had to do. One last thing. One final fire to light. They said she didn't belong in that house. But now her portrait hangs in the golden frame above the fireplace. A year later, the Worthington estate didn't look the same. The portraits had changed. Gone were the pale oil paintings of cold men and glassy-eyed women. Now, in the grand hall, hung 3, Josephine B. Worthington, in vibrant colors holding a paintbrush, Liana Imani Wells, eyes bright, chin lifted, wrapped in gold and green, and between them, a photo of black girls dancing on the mansion lawn, free. The estate had become the Josephine Center for Legacy and Light. Workshops, writing retreats, mental health circles, fashion design scholarships, all for the girls who'd been called too much, too dark, too loud, too different. Now they had a home, a crown, and a name to stand on. And as for Liana, she stood in the garden watching the young ones paint murals on the brick walls. A girl walked up, maybe 10, skin rich as molasses, hair full of sky. "Miss Liana," she said, "were you really just a maid here?" Liana smiled, slow and deep. "No, baby. I was the storm that cleaned the house." The girl giggled, ran off, and Liana looked up at the sun, eyes closed, heart still. She didn't just survive. She inherited herself. If this story touched your heart like it touched mine, leave a word below. Aunt Grace is always here, with stories for souls that been through the fire and came out shining. Thank you for walking with me.